Welcome back. We've been giving you updates on Senate Bill 168, the Tristin Murphy Act. As you may remember from our documentary Warehouse, the life and death of Tristin Murphy, the state has long failed to properly treat people with mental illnesses who end up in the criminal justice system. Tristan, a schizophrenic sentenced to prison on a littering charge, killed himself with a chainsaw. This legislation, named in his honor, will be the single greatest reform to the mental health system in decades. It has been a priority of Senate President Ben Albritton and was sponsored by Senator Jen Bradley. It has passed through every committee in the House and the Senate unanimously, with its last committee stop in the Senate Appropriations Committee on Wednesday.
This is a step in the right direction, and changing how we think about mental health is absolutely key.
We need to give people treatment as opposed to incarceration when it's warranted.
Senator Bradley, you've worked hard on this bill, and I commend you for bringing forward something that will save lives and make a lot of people's lives better.
There are families across the state of Florida who live in fear that their loved ones with mental illness are going to have that intersection, are going to cross with the criminal justice system, and they're going to get brought into the deep end of the system, which is really the last place they should be. And so this bill provides some off-ramps on the front end to get people treatment, sustained treatment, where they're not just released without any mental health plan, only to find themselves right back where they started, which is what happened to Tristan over and over again until a felony littering charge put him in the Department of Corrections. That was not a fit under any model, and it had tragic consequences. And this will change that. This will provide some off-ramps and target treatment, and hopefully give families some hope who are trying to manage loved ones with mental illness, that if that intersection does happen, there is hope and there is treatment and there is an opportunity to right the course.
After it passed out of the committee, I spoke to Miami-Dade Judge Steve Leifman, who has pushed for this type of reform for years.
The Tristin Murphy Act is the most significant mental health legislation since the passage of the Baker Act. And the reason that is because when community mental health was developed in the United States, the most acutely ill individuals were still in hospitals. And when we deinstitutionalized, went to the war on crime, the war on drugs, sentencing guidelines, this population with very acute mental illnesses, primarily psychotic disorders, got thrown into communities that were not built for them. And unfortunately, they ended up in our criminal justice system. Miami-Dade County is a perfect example. Between 70 and 80% of our entire jail population suffers with mental illnesses. We spend $1.2 million a day, it's $413 million a year to warehouse this population. And they just continuously cycle between the jail, hospitals, and homelessness again and again at huge cost to the society and at huge cost to themselves. What this legislation does is it basically scales what we developed 25 years ago in Miami-Dade, which is we figured out a way to divert and deflect this population into treatment. And it works. And it will save the state enormous resources. It'll save the county resources, and it will allow this population to live with a life of hope and recovery, and it will improve our public safety. It is a win-win-win. They even attached resources to help communities implement this legislation, but it stops us from a lot of the silly stuff that we've been doing, which is this over-reliance on using competency restoration to try to get people treated, which will never work because competency restoration has nothing to do with treatment. And this is a really smart piece of legislation, and I have to compliment you, Jim, quite candidly. This never would have happened without the brilliant documentary that you did, and you brought this case to life. And, you know, he didn't die in vain as a result of it. And it is a major piece of legislation. Sheriff Promell, the president, they just deserve great credit for taking this and turning it into legislation. And look, I've been working in this area for a long time with the Florida legislature. It's also the first bill that they didn't screw up. I mean, it is clean. It actually does what it says it's going to do. There's not any silliness in it. They didn't play with it. They wrote it in a way that it will actually work. So I'm thrilled with it. We tried to get something like this done 20 years ago. It didn't happen, and it took you and what you were able to do, and also Tristan's mom for advocating positive change and taking a tragedy and turning it into something that is going to make a difference.
At the end of the day, I think what this case did was it brought it in stark reality, what exactly this is. And you're absolutely right about Cindy Murphy, the willingness of Tristan's mom, his dad, to speak out, to let this story be told, really does bring it to life in a way that I don't think anything that you could have testified to or any of us could have talked about could have done in the past.
100%. And look, there's so much noise out there, more so today than ever. And this is, I guess, what it takes, tragically, to break through it. But, I think as President Biden used to say, you want to bring purpose to tragedy, and that's what happened here. And it really is going to make a difference in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. This stuff works. Our program reduced arrests in Dade County from 118,000 to 55,000. Our jail audit went from 7,400 to 4,400. That's the kind of results that you get by passing this type of legislation. And so, like I said, it improves our public safety, it spends tax dollars a lot more effectively, and it allows people with these very serious illnesses an opportunity for hope and recovery. And I think it's going to make a huge difference throughout the entire state. And I will tell you this, I think it will be emulated nationally. I know of no other state that has passed legislation this clean, that attacks the problem at the root and spends the resources where they need to be spent so that we keep people out of the criminal justice system and we make the criminal justice system the last resort for people with these serious mental illnesses, not the entry point.
One of the things that I saw that I found rather heartening was you have the program that you pioneered here in Miami-Dade County. This legislation calls for expanding it in Hillsborough County. And during some of the Senate and House committee hearings that I've been watching on it, you had members from other counties sort of coming forward and saying, I look forward to bringing this into my county. I'm looking for, Senator Harrell talked about wanting to do this in Martin County. Other senators talked about wanting to bring it into their counties, to talk to their county sheriffs about expanding this. It almost now becomes the type of thing where it becomes a status thing. Can you bring this? Can you deliver this to your county? Why should it just be Dade or Hillsborough? Let's bring it elsewhere.
And I think what will happen is, advocates around the state will see it and they will push their own local communities to make this happen. But this is the thing. All you need to do is speak to your local sheriff, who is the largest mental health provider in the community. And they know it's wrong. They know it doesn't work. They also know it is enormously expensive. Because remember, when this population is behind bars, they do not qualify for any Medicaid or insurance. So the county spends or has to pay 100% of the cost. And this population also has very, very serious primary health costs, which the county also has to pay for. But when you divert them into treatment outside the jail, they then become eligible for Medicaid dollars, and it significantly reduces the local cost, and you get much better outcomes. So like I said, it's a win-win all around. It's beautifully written, and very confident it's going to make a huge difference in the state and eventually around the country.
The Tristin Murphy Act will be on the Senate floor next week. We'll keep you posted. We'll be right back.